Welcome to Herself, a space for women to have deep conversations about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential, so you can become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. After being in business for over 2 decades, I've learned, as you likely have too, that as you grow your business grows you in unexpected, often challenging, yet miraculous ways. Here, we'll talk about how to get out of your own way so you can grow a business that's abundant and sustainable while allowing you to be a force for good in the world. I'll give you simple, actionable strategies as well as wisdom and inspiration to help you root into your wholeness, lead from your values, and work in ways that feel deeply aligned so you can bring your true self into the world through your business and in every area of your life. I want to take you back to spring of 2011, which was my first book launch. And I was 32 years old and I had just published The Way of the Happy Woman. I was on this whirlwind of a book tour. I just had this dream of kind of being that kind of quintessential author and going on a book tour. So I flew out to the West Coast and went from San Francisco to Portland to Seattle to Vancouver. And I had various events where I was giving talks at bookstores and on different news programs. And I also had some events in my former hometown of Boulder, Colorado. By the end of it, I had really bad insomnia. I was really stressed out. And I had just been on this extended push that had been going on for really over a year at that point. So from maybe even like a year and a half at that point, from writing the proposal to submitting it to publishers, to writing the book, to editing, to re-editing, to copy editing. Then the whole marketing machine kicked in and book signings and interviews and workshops and trying to get on every news platform that I could. And I was saying yes to everything because that was my big moment, right? And that was what I had worked so hard for. And I remember that was the first time that I heard people telling me that writing a book is like running a marathon and you just need to pace yourself because there are different legs of the journey. And, I really learned that in that process. And I realized that, I'd kind of been sprinting the entire race rather than pacing myself. So I was exhausted. I was depleted. My nervous system was fried. And of course, for subsequent books, I learned from my past mistakes, and I did that differently. But when the tour ended, I remember meeting with my mentor, and I was probably complaining about how tired I was, how overwhelmed I felt, and instead of just sympathizing, she challenged me, or really she invited me to do something radical. And she said, "You need to go on a vacation." And because I think I was saying, well, I think I'll go on a retreat. And she said, a vacation is different than a retreat. And you go on a lot of retreats, but you need to go on a real vacation. And she said, not just for 1 week, because that's 1 week, 7 days is not really enough time to truly land, to really shift into a different rhythm. Because if you think about like when you take a week-long vacation, you arrive on that first day, well, you lose a day because you usually travel. So the next day, it's like you can already see really in the near future, your departure. You can already see the end date. So she was saying ideally 14 days because that gives you a much greater sense of spaciousness. But if you can't manage 14, at least 10 days, because 10 days, you still, on your arrival day, that still feels like really far out, a lot further out than 7 days. So she said it also needs to be real time off. So no checking emails, no thinking about business, etc. And at first I resisted. I just felt like, that feels like a big expense. That feels like a lot of time away. But I took her up on the challenge. I took her up on the invitation. And with my first royalty check that I got for that first book, which just felt so symbolic, I was like, okay, I put so much into this and I am just going to take this and give myself something that I've never given myself before. And I booked 10 days on Kauai I booked it for myself and my former partner. And I'd never been to Hawaii before. I'd always wanted to go. I'd heard incredible things about Kauai. So I booked us flights. I booked us an Airbnb. I booked us a rental car for 10 days. And I made the commitment to totally unplug. I was not bringing my laptop. I was not bringing any of my nonfiction books. It was only going to be novels, and there was going to be just full unplugged enjoyment time in Hawaii. And looking back, that was really the most generous thing that I'd ever done for myself up to that point. And it really did change me. And as I look back at that vacation, it was one of the best experiences that I've had. And I absolutely loved it. And it was so recharging. It was so inspiring. And it was worth every penny. Like, yes, it was expensive. And yes, it was a gift I gave to myself with that first royalty check. And yes, it was so worth it. And it's really changed just how I approach time off and how I think about vacation versus retreat time, and how, how giving ourselves a gift like that can just be so transformational. And, here's something else that I've realized is that most of the women that I work with have never fully given themselves that kind of permission. Just like up until that point, I hadn't given myself that kind of permission. And they'll never take the leap of saying, my well-being is worth this investment. My sustainability, my aliveness, my juiciness, my fulfillment matters more than how much I'm helping people or how much I'm producing. So let me ask you, when was the last time that you took a real vacation? Not a retreat, not a working vacation, not a family obligation, but actual time off to a place that brings you deep pleasure, where you weren't checking emails or thinking about your clients or taking care of other people's needs. And even on a smaller scale, when was the last time that you went to a yoga class just for you? Because I know that vacations, it's a financial investment. So for sure that we're not always able to do. And we can also do things on a much smaller scale. So going to a yoga class, or when was the last time that you went out to lunch with girlfriends on a weekday or even on a weekend, or that you took yourself out for breakfast, or that you laid in a hammock and read a novel? So if you are drawing a blank, keep listening, my dear. You are caught up in everyone else's needs, but you are behind on your own needs, on your own life. And maybe you're working weekends to catch up on admin because the week was full of client work. Or maybe you tell yourself that you will prioritize self-care when things slow down, but of course we all know that they never really do. And if you are a healer or a helper, there's often this voice inside that whispers, you really should be there for other people. It's selfish to focus on yourself. Your needs can wait. And I know you've heard the saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. I know that you know that intellectually, and you've probably even said it to your own clients, but somehow you likely still cannot make that shift yourself, just like I couldn't all those years ago. And I couldn't have booked that vacation for myself if my mentor hadn't challenged me. And I'm so glad that she did. So I'm challenging you today, and we're going to shine a new light on why this pattern of being over responsible and under resourced is so persistent, and what we can do to shift it at its root. So let's look more closely at the root of over responsibility. Like, where does this come from? And to do that, I want to first normalize something. That over-functioning, and I raise my hand, I am so over-functioning, and I welcome you to raise your hand with me. Okay, I know, I can feel most of us, if not all of us, are raising our hands right now. Over-functioning is often praised as success by our dominant culture. So you are seen as the reliable one, the capable one, the one who gets things done. People praise you for being so responsible, so helpful, so giving. And here's what's happening beneath all that. So this pattern of being over-functioning runs so much deeper than personal choice or even just our family of origin conditioning. For centuries, our survival as women depended on being useful, being agreeable, being indispensable to the people, particularly the men around us. So in patriarchal societies, women who were too demanding, too outspoken, too boundaried, too focused on their own needs were often cast out, abandoned, or worse, killed. That is just the truth. So, of course, we learned generation after generation to be the caregivers, to be the peace givers, to be the ones who hold everything together. And we learned that our safety comes from being needed, not from being valued for standing up for what we believe in or speaking what we need. And this conditioning, of course, it lives in our bodies. It's like it's actually in our DNA. And it is why setting a boundary can feel like a life or death threat. Because I work with my clients to help them set boundaries with their clients. And it's so triggering for them. And understandably, there's this whole tsunami of history behind setting a boundary as a woman. And, it's why saying no can bring up waves and waves of guilt and terror. And it's why prioritizing yourself and your own needs can feel so fundamentally wrong, even when, again, intellectually, you know how necessary it is. Okay, so what are the sources of this over responsibility? Well, again, it's rooted in our ancestral lineages. And part of that is the good girl programming. So this pattern gets reinforced in our individual lives. And many of us learned early on that our worth was tied to how helpful we could be as little girls. So maybe you were the oldest child who became like the second parent, or you grew up in a chaotic home where being hyper responsible, kind of a parentified, couldn't find that word, parentified child. It was what you needed to do to survive. Or maybe you were just rewarded over and over for being the good girl because you were the ones who didn't cause problems or you helped to solve the problems. And this programming says things inside of us like, if you're not useful, you're not valuable, or other people's needs matter than yours, or good women sacrifice for others. And then the second source of over responsibility is the spiritual bypass. So if you are a spiritually oriented woman, there's often this other layer where we're taught that service equals sacrifice, that being spiritual means being selfless, and that focusing on your own needs is somehow less evolved or less spiritual. And I see this particularly in my clients who are healers, who are coaches, who are helpers, and they believe usually unconsciously that their role is just to give endlessly, and that having boundaries or preferences or prioritizing their own well-being is selfish or unspiritual or just simply wrong. And here's the truth, and I know that you know this, that self-abandonment is not service. That martyrdom is not ministry. The third source of over responsibility is called the entrepreneurial trap. And this is when we start these businesses and then we recreate these same patterns on steroids. So you start your business thinking, okay, well, this will be a path to having more freedom, more control over my time and energy than working for an agency or getting a 9-to-5 job. And in starting your own business, you become responsible for everything and everyone, even more so than you would if you were working for someone else. And not only that, but then you're not even paying yourself a fair wage. You undercharge because you feel guilty asking for rates that will really support the lifestyle that you want to have. You over-deliver because you're afraid people won't be satisfied or like you're not doing enough. You work nights or weekends because that's just what it takes. You don't hire help because you think it's just easier to do it yourself. And you don't trust yourself or your business enough to be able to expand to sustain that expense. And so then the very qualities that make you such an incredible healer or coach or service provider, practitioner, your empathy, your intuition, your service-oriented heart, those actually become the very things that trap you in these cycles of over giving and under receiving. Now let's talk about what this over responsibility is actually costing you, because while it might look like dedication or a strong work ethic from the outside, the price that you're paying is actually much higher than you initially realized. So let's talk about that energetic cost. Well, it's like I was at the end of that book launch, I was running on empty. And when that happens, we know that that creative spark that once fueled our work, it's just dimmed down and it's barely even a flicker anymore. And like I was feeling at the end of that book tour, I was waking up tired. And by the end of the day, you're just completely drained. And maybe you used to have ideas flowing, inspiration striking at random moments, but then now you find yourself just in survival mode, just trying to just get through the day, just trying to check off those things on your to-do list. And then that visionary part of you, the one who started this all in the first place, has just gone quiet because really there's no energy left to feed that visionary in you. And so then you just find yourself kind of just going through the motions, delivering good work, but feeling disconnected from it. And then the passion that once drove you feels buried under the weight of all the things that you think that you really have to do. And then there's an emotional cost. So amidst all this, if we're honest with ourselves, there's a quiet resentment building. And that can be towards your clients who seem to need you constantly. It could be toward your family or members of your family who expect you to handle everything, or who take time for themselves and expect you to pick up the slack. Or maybe it's resentment toward yourself for saying yes when you really wanted to say no, or for not prioritizing your own needs in the way that other parts of you really want you to. And then you feel guilty when you do rest or when you do something for yourself because you know there's something else that needs doing. And then you're suppressing that rage that comes up when you realize that just how available you've been for everyone else, but you haven't had anyone that's really available for you. And underneath it all, there's just this question of, well, why does it all fall on me? Why does it always keep falling on me? And then there may be even some guilt that comes up for even asking yourself that question. Then there's the financial cost. And here's what's really insidious is that over responsibility, it's kind of a paradox, but it often leads to inconsistent income. And let me explain that, because when you are constantly in this pushing reactive mode, you don't have space to think strategically or creatively about your business. You don't have energy to be consistent with your marketing or your visibility or following up with prospects. And you're so busy delivering for current clients that you're not creating the systems that could help you to grow more sustainably. So you're just trading time for money in a way that keeps you stuck, because really there are only so many hours in the day where you could work, right? And then you're afraid to raise your rates or invest in support. So you just stay trapped in this cycle where you just have to work more to earn more. And then that just keeps draining the battery. Then there's a visibility cost, because when you're chronically overextended, you start shrinking back and you don't have the energy to show up consistently through your marketing channels or on social media. And you don't have the time to pitch speaking opportunities, and you don't put yourself forward for collaborations. You don't try to be visible. And, because people can feel when you're broadcasting from a place of depletion rather than that kind of cup overflowing, and people can sense that you're running on fumes, and it doesn't create that kind of magnetic presence that will really draw in ideal clients. And then there's the physical cost. And, we know from Bessel van der Kolk's work, the body is keeping the score. And there's chronic tension in your shoulders from carrying too much. There may be digestive issues from eating on the run and all the stress, or sleep problems because your mind can't turn off the mental loop of everything that you need to do tomorrow. You might have headaches, back pain, mysterious ailments that doctors can't quite explain. But your body is trying to get your attention, and you keep pushing through because there's just too much to do to slow down. And then there's a relational cost, and your relationships suffer because you're always on, and If you have a partner, they may feel like you're competing with your business for your attention. Or maybe if you don't have a partner, you don't really have time to date. Maybe your friendships become one-sided because you're always the one listening, supporting, holding space, but you're rarely receiving. And you might just find yourself feeling isolated, like even when you're surrounded by people who care about you because, you've trained everyone that you're the strong one who just doesn't need support. And so the cost is higher than you think. And if we look at all this, we know that it's just not sustainable. So what is the alternative here? What is the alternative if we are high functioning women? How do we break free from this cycle without stepping away from our values, our very service oriented values and missions? And this is where it's time to talk about sovereignty. And I want to be clear about what I mean by this word, sovereignty. It's not about control. It's not about dominance. True sovereignty is about resourcefulness, about being able to source your own energy, source your own wisdom, make decisions from your own center, and create from a place of fullness rather than depletion. It's about shifting from survival mode to sustainable leadership. It's about shifting from being led by our parts, our protective parts, to being led by our true self. So, how do we shift? How do we shift from self-sacrifice to sacred leadership? And this first shift is redefining what responsibility actually means. So, true leadership includes responsibility to yourself first and foremost, not as an afterthought, but as a fundamental requirement, as the foundation. You cannot lead others to places that you have not been yourself. If you want to help people create sustainable, fulfilling lives, you need to model that in your own life first. So sacred leadership means recognizing that your well-being is not separate from your service. It's actually the ground from which your service can flow. When you are resourced, when you are rested, when you are operating from your center, you can serve at a much higher level than when you're running on fumes. And this means treating your self-care as business critical, not something you'll do when things slow down. It means scheduling your own needs first and then building your business around that foundation. So the second shift is going from a martyr to a CEO. And this requires seeing systems, not more effort, as your path to sustainable leadership. Because here's the thing about CEOs. They do not try to do everything themselves. They create systems and they delegate strategically. So this means in investing in support, even when it feels scary, even before you feel ready, emotionally, logistically, financially. It means automating what can be automated. It means creating boundaries around your time and energy that protect your ability to do your highest level work. It also means pricing your services in a way that allows you to work less and earn more, rather than trying to be the cheapest option who works the hardest. And when you operate as a CEO, you make decisions based on sustainability and also strategic impact, not on whether or not other people are going to like you or needing to prove yourself through endless effort. The third shift is the shift from the lone wolf to the supported woman. And this is really recognizing that isolation is not noble, it is limiting. And the most successful businesses are built by people who have strong support systems in their personal lives and in their professional lives. So this means seeking out like-minded community and mentorship. It means being willing to receive as much as you give. It means letting yourself be held and guided instead of always being the one holding and guiding others or figuring it out for yourself. And it means recognizing that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of wisdom. It is the most powerful leaders who know what their strengths are, and then they're willing to delegate everything else. And we can't all do this from the beginning, but we can begin step by step, delegating things bit by bit. Then there's another shift from proving to being, from proving to being. And, we could say that this final shift is maybe the most fundamental, moving from feeling like you need to earn approval or earn your sense of self-worth through your output to just claiming how valuable you are just by being who you are. And this means giving yourself permission to rest without having earned it. It means saying no without needing to over-explain or justify. It means taking up space, asking for what you need, trusting that you deserve support simply because you're human, simply because you exist. And when you stop trying to prove your worth just by just showing how much you can handle, you just free up huge amounts of energy that can be redirected to what you're actually here to create, what you're actually here to be up to. And I really also want to emphasize that these shifts do not happen overnight. They do require rewiring of patterns that have been decades in the making, generations in the making even, but they are totally possible. And they are what's necessary if you want to build something that is truly sustainable and truly fulfilling. So if you are listening to this and you're thinking, yes, Sarah, I know I need to do all these things, and I just can't seem to make it stick, because I know that you've been at this for some time. You are not a beginner in this arena of personal growth and soul evolution. And the reason these shifts feel so hard isn't because you lack the capacity. It's not because you lack the willpower, the discipline. It's just because you're trying to change these deeply ingrained patterns that don't just live in your mind, they live in your body, in the parts of you that still operate from those old survival strategies. And, we can't think our way out of this over responsibility. We need tools to work with our whole system, with our parts, with our nervous system, with our somatic wisdom in order to create lasting change. And this is definitely not about adding more to your already full plate, because I know that's just not even possible. It's about a fundamental paradigm shift in how you approach your leadership, your boundaries, your relationship with your own life force. And this is exactly what we are going to go into more depth in my free workshop that is coming up this month. It's called The Sovereign Shift: How to Stop Overgiving, Start Leading, and Build a Business That Truly Serves. And this workshop, we're going to explore why over responsibility keeps even the most accomplished women playing small, and how to set boundaries that serve both your mission and your body's wisdom. We're going to explore what to do when you're caught between old patterns of self-sacrifice and new visions of sustainable leadership, why traditional productivity advice keeps you stuck in cycles of burnout, and what it really means to lead from your whole self, and the secret to building a business that holds you instead of drains you, one that becomes a source of energy rather than a constant demand on it. Now, this isn't just a quick fix or another productivity hack. This is about learning to lead from a completely different paradigm, one that's rooted in your values, your energy, your season of life. If you are ready to stop surviving your business and start being held by it, this workshop is your invitation to step into a new way of being and of leading. So you can save your free seat at sarahavaughtstover.com/shift. That's sarahavaughtstover.com/shift, or you can click the link in the show notes, sarahavaughtstover.com/shift. Because here's the truth, right? You don't need to choose between success and sustainability. You don't have to run yourself into the ground to be of service. There actually is another way, and it's right here. And it starts with you making your sovereign shift. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this. Over-responsibility is not a character flaw. It is a survival strategy that has now outlived its usefulness. You developed these patterns for good reasons. They helped you navigate situations where being indispensable felt like the only way to be safe, to be valued, to be loved. But what once protected you is now constraining you. And there is a path forward that allows you to serve deeply while being deeply supported. But it requires you to learn to operate from sovereignty instead of survival. So again, if this conversation has stirred something in you, I encourage you to take that next step. Join us in the Sovereign Shift workshop, and let's explore what becomes possible when you stop over-functioning and start leading from your center. So remember, your well-being is not selfish. It is the most generous thing that you have to give, and the world needs you operating from your fullness, not your depletion. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, change doesn't come from listening alone. I invite you to commit to taking one small or large, courageous action after today's conversation. One step you can take, if you haven't already, is to sign up for my Sunday journal. It's a weekly newsletter filled with inspiration and reflections about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential to help you become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. You can subscribe at programs-sarahavonstover.com/journal. And if you found this podcast valuable, please share it with the women in your world. Also, I'd be very grateful if you'd leave a review. It helps others find resources like this, and I'd love to hear what's coming alive for you after listening today. Above all, keep going, and never forget the unique offerings you and your true self bring to the world. Until next time, I'm sending you my heartfelt support.